The stage was set, but this wasn't just another live TV debate. It felt like a defining moment for the soul of America. On one side stood Karoline Leavitt, sharp, composed, and unshakably loyal to the America First vision. On the other, pop icon Taylor Swift, stepping into political waters with celebrity charm and crowd-pleasing ideals. As the cameras rolled and the crowd hushed, viewers across the country leaned in. This wasn't about fame or flash. This was about values. One woman came armed with policy and purpose, the other with lyrics and applause. And tonight, America would decide which voice truly speaks for its future. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment with your state. We want to hear where true patriots are tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe. Stories like this are just getting started. It wasn't just another debate. It was a line in the sand. Millions across America sat frozen in their living rooms. Coffee mugs half sipped. Recliners leaned back just a little further. On the screen before them wasn't just TV. It was a battlefield. On one side stood Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history, a woman who walked into the lion's den with nothing but a binder of facts, a lifetime of backbone, and a heart full of truth. And on the other, Taylor Swift, global superstar, Billboard darling, political newcomer. The set of the great American debate gleamed beneath sharp lights and red, white, blue backdrops. A grand arena where politics met pop culture, and only one would walk out standing tall. The announcer's voice echoed across the airwaves. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your debaters for tonight, Ms. Taylor Swift and Ms. Karoline Leavitt. The applause thundered. Some stood cheering with glittery signs. Taylor for change. Others clapped with pride and faith, whispering, "Let's go, Karoline. Give 'em the truth." And from the very first second, you could tell. This wasn't going to be polite. Karoline took her place with a quiet authority, shoulders straight, chin high. She wore a crisp navy blue suit, a silver pin on her collar. Calm, collected, no notes in hand. Just confidence. Taylor, dressed in flowing white, waved softly to the crowd like she was entering a music awards ceremony. But Karoline, she wasn't here to perform. She was here to defend a vision of America that so many in that crowd and watching from home felt slipping through their fingers. The host raised his hand. First topic, women's rights. Ms. Swift, you have the floor. Taylor stepped forward, her voice smooth and poised. She spoke of dreams, of girls looking in the mirror, of feelings, of freedom, of pain. She quoted lyrics and moments from her world tours. There were tears in the crowd. Her fans hung on every word. And then the baton passed. Ms. Leavitt, your response? Karoline stood. She smiled, and her voice, low but sure, cut through the air like a violin slicing silence. I love Fearless. Great song, but I don't need a verse to prove women are powerful. I live it. The crowd stirred. You could feel the tension shift. Even those watching from their couches leaned forward instinctively. I've never played to sold-out arenas, she continued, but I've stood at the White House podium. I've helped lead press briefings with world leaders waiting outside the door. I've walked into rooms full of men twice my age and never once asked for a song. I brought results. Applause began. First a few MAGA hats clapping, then more. Women don't need more slogans. We need opportunity, and that's exactly what the Trump administration gave us. Taylor blinked, surprised. Before the pandemic, Karoline went on, women's unemployment was the lowest in U.S. history. We funded vocational programs. We lowered drug prices. We gave working mothers a real chance, not just a platform to protest. She paused, looked at the camera. Ladies, let's stop settling for Instagram empowerment. Let's talk real jobs, real policy, real impact. And that's when the crowd exploded. One man in the front row, gray hair, Vietnam vet cap, tears in his eyes, shouted, "That's my girl! That's my president's team!" Karoline sat down quietly, her face calm. Swift, visibly shaken, asked for a rebuttal. She spoke again, about feelings, about personal stories, about women who had been hurt by policies, but she offered no numbers, no facts, just emotion. And across the internet, the hashtags began to explode. Leavitt wins, round one. Truth, overtunes. She did not come to play. And in living rooms across the country, older Americans sat up a little straighter. They knew what they had just witnessed. They knew what kind of backbone it took to say those words in that room. As the moderator called for a break, Karoline took a sip of water. Taylor looked down at her notes. But the verdict had already been whispered between neighbors, posted online, and settled in the hearts of many. Round one, Karoline, hands down. When the show returned from commercial break, the mood had shifted. Gone was the soft haze of celebrity awe. Now there was an edge, a tension. Something electric was in the air, and everyone knew why. Because in round one, Karoline Leavitt hadn't just held her ground, she dominated. Now it was time for round two. Misinformation. The moderator, his voice sharp, turned to Taylor. "Miss Swift, how do you think misinformation is affecting our country?" Taylor straightened her mic. Her voice was tender, almost a whisper. "Misinformation is tearing us apart," she began. "I've seen families fight, fans confused, people hurt by lies, especially from politicians and public figures. That's why I double-check everything before I post. Words matter." A young fan in the audience held up a sign. "We love your truth, Taylor." Taylor continued, weaving stories of how headlines make people anxious, how she wants her followers to feel safe in the facts. Then she stopped. The moderator turned. "Ms. Leavitt, your rebuttal?" And that's when Karoline struck gold. Her tone was respectful, but her words, razor sharp. "Taylor, I know you're passionate. I know you mean well, but you don't fight misinformation with feelings. You fight it with facts." Applause. "I've watched as legacy media lied about Trump, lied about the economy, lied about border security. And you shared some of those headlines, Taylor. You reposted things that were later proven false. You called conservatives dangerous just for asking questions." Gasps, audible gasps from the crowd. But here's the truth. Misinformation doesn't come from one party. It comes from power, unchecked. And when celebrities share misleading posts to millions of followers, that's not activism. That's irresponsibility. Taylor's jaw tensed. Karoline pressed forward. "I don't care how many followers you have. If you're going to lecture Americans about truth, you better bring the receipts." And then she paused. Perfect timing. "I didn't come here to sing," she said, her voice steady. "I came to defend a country where truth matters, where data beats drama, where facts beat fame." That's when the audience burst into cheers. Even some of Taylor's own fans couldn't help but nod. Across social media, clips of Karoline's statement went viral. One user wrote, "Taylor brought emotion. Karoline brought evidence. One of them belongs in Washington. The other should stick to music." And in a small town in Arkansas, a retired school teacher texted her church group, "Karoline is so brilliant and doing a great job. That girl's got steel in her spine." Back on stage, Taylor tried to recover. "But misinformation hurts women, minorities, climate victims," she said, her voice wavering. Karoline leaned forward, slow, calm, deadly clear. "Taylor, I agree it hurts. That's why I tell the truth, even when it's hard. That's why I defend leaders who take bullets, literal or verbal, for standing up for the American people. That's why I came here tonight." And then came the mic drop. "You want to inspire the next generation? Good, but don't do it with filtered tweets and teary speeches. Do it with facts, sacrifice, and truth. The room went silent, and somewhere deep in the crowd, an elderly man stood and began to clap. Others followed. A wave of applause rose, not for a pop star, but for a woman who reminded the nation that truth still had a voice. The lights shifted to gold, evoking the warming planet, the rising seas, the crisis that had dominated media headlines for the better part of a decade. And standing dead center of it all was Taylor Swift. The moderator spoke with a theatrical flair. Next topic, climate change. Miss Swift, you may begin. Taylor inhaled. Her white dress glimmered. Her voice rose like the beginning of a power ballad. I've seen fire sweep through forests, she said. I've seen floods turn homes into memories. And I've heard children, young, innocent children, ask if there's even going to be a world left for them to live in. A hush fell over the crowd. I don't come here with anger, Taylor continued. I come with urgency. I've met with climate scientists, with young activists, with mothers who cry at night because their water's poisoned or their food is unsafe. And I say, no more delay. She pointed a finger upward as if sealing the final note of a chorus. We must invest in clean energy, regulate corporate pollution, and believe science, not profit. A roar of applause swept over half the room. Swift fans clapped hard. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. The moderator nodded solemnly. Ms. Leavitt, your response? Karoline stood slowly, calmly, like a woman who had seen a storm coming, and brought a stronger one in her back pocket. Taylor, she said, your emotion is real. I respect it, but with all due respect, I came here to talk about solutions, not soundtracks. Boom, gasps, a few chuckles. And in the back row, an older gentleman in a denim shirt muttered, That girl's got guts. Karoline continued, her voice as crisp as the air outside a New Hampshire diner at dawn. I've walked through coal towns where dads haven't worked in months, not because they're lazy, but because celebrities lobbied to shut down their industry. She looked toward the camera now, as if speaking to every blue-collar family watching from home. I've sat with single mothers who couldn't afford to heat their homes this winter because gas prices spiked under energy regulations you cheer. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't waver. It just grew heavier, with truth. You want to replace oil and gas? Fine. But answer me this. Will your green dream put food on their table this week? This month? This year? Silence. I looked at your Instagram post last year, Taylor. You said, and I quote, we can't keep burning the earth for profit. But what you forgot is that the people you're criticizing, they're not monsters. They're mechanics, electricians, loggers, veterans, fathers. They keep this country running, and they don't deserve to be vilified because you wrote a song about Mother Nature. Now the crowd rumbled. MAGA hats were nodding. Even some undecideds were sitting up straighter. And one mother, tears in her eyes, clutched her child tighter, mouthing thank you toward the stage. Karoline wasn't done. The Department of Labor, she continued, reports that the average green energy job pays nearly 30% less than oil and gas. That's not theory. That's not poetry. That's payroll. She stepped closer to the edge of the stage. And the Green New Deal you champion, Taylor? It would raise electricity prices across America by up to 35%, per the American Energy Institute. That's not a path to progress. That's a tax on the poor. Applause broke out like thunder. Taylor tried to interject. But those studies, Karoline raised a single hand. No slogans, Taylor. Just numbers, just lives, just America. The moderator had to step in. We must allow Ms. Swift her rebuttal. But by then, the damage was done. Taylor's words, though passionate, sounded softer, smaller. Her fans still cheered. But the tone had shifted. Even online, the hashtags turned brutal. Caroline owns the climate. Stage. Kakashi Swift can sing not debate. Kanash energy reality check. And for many seniors watching across the country, it was the first time someone had said what they were feeling for years. That climate urgency was starting to feel like economic suffocation. Karoline finished with this. I want a clean planet too, but I also want kids to eat, mothers to sleep without worry, and men who built this country to know we haven't forgotten them. And in that moment, one truth was clear. Karoline Leavitt didn't just win round 3. She redefined what courage on a debate stage looked like. The lights dimmed slightly. The moderator, now smiling with restrained excitement, raised a hand like a conductor preparing for a crescendo. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the final round. Audience questions. From the front row, a woman in her early 20s, wearing a Swift-branded t-shirt, rose nervously. Her voice trembled. This question is for Ms. Swift. You inspire millions of us through music. How do you think pop culture can help fix our broken politics? Taylor beamed. Finally, a friendly question. I think pop culture, she said, can heal. It can unify. I've seen people from all over the world, different races, backgrounds, beliefs, come together at concerts. I think we need more empathy, more listening, more love. A cheer erupted. Swift fans stood and clapped. Yes, Taylor, someone screamed. Then the moderator turned, slowly and dramatically. Ms. Leavitt, your response? Karoline stood, smile intact, eyes burning bright. I agree, she said softly, that we need unity. I agree that music can heal, but pop culture alone won't fix a single broken road, won't lower your taxes, won't defend your right to speak freely when it's unpopular. She stepped forward, pausing as if choosing her next words with care. I love that you write songs, Taylor. I admire your influence. But this country doesn't need another anthem. It needs leadership. And leadership isn't about applause. It's about accountability, the crowd murmured. Real unity, she added, isn't built with choruses. It's built with truth. And sometimes that truth is hard. It hurts, but it's worth saying. Another hand shot up, this time a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt and MAGA hat. My question is for Karoline. How can the next generation of conservatives stand strong when we're outnumbered in the media, in schools and tech? Karoline's smile shifted. More solemn, more personal. I was 24 when I walked into the Trump White House as a press aide. I was outnumbered in every media room I ever entered, but I never walked in afraid. She paused. I walked in with the truth. Applause again. She leaned in, her voice steady, intimate. Courage isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about being the clearest, the calmest, the most consistent. Don't apologize for loving this country. Don't hide your faith. And don't ever think your voice is too small. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs spine. The audience roared. Taylor tried to speak, but her eyes were fixed on Karoline, like even she knew something profound had just been said. Then came the final question. From the back row, a woman stood. White hair, wrinkled hands, a rosary wrapped around her wrist. I've been voting since Reagan, she said softly, and I'm scared for our country. Ms. Leavitt, do you believe we can still turn this around? Karoline didn't answer immediately. She looked out across the sea of faces, young and old, liberal and conservative, fans and critics. Then she said, yes. The word echoed like a promise. Yes, she repeated, because I've seen what happens when truth walks into a room full of lies. I've seen it tonight. She turned to the older woman. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And no, it's not too late. She paused and then looked directly into the camera. It's never too late for a country built on courage. And with that, the hall erupted. Even some who had come to cheer for Swift stood, not out of allegiance, but out of awe. Karoline didn't just answer the question, she answered a nation's ache, and the debate was no longer about policy, it had become something else. A reminder that truth still has a voice, and tonight, that voice belonged to Karoline Leavitt. The debate had ended. The applause had slowly faded. The moderators exchanged polite goodbyes. The lights dimmed, but in homes across America, the conversation had just begun. Online, it wasn't even close. Karoline crushed it to truth over celebrity, Swift silenced, by Leavitt. News outlets scrambled to cover the fallout. Some leaned left, some right, but none could deny it. Karoline Leavitt had done what few thought possible. She walked into a room designed for theatrics and walked out with something bigger. Respect. CNN tried to spin it. Taylor Swift shows heart and climate plea. But Fox News headlined it differently. Leavitt dominates with data and dignity. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Seniors who'd felt unheard for years began flooding comment sections. Finally, someone speaking for the real America. Karoline is so brilliant and doing a great job. She reminded me of Reagan in heels. Backstage, Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't brag. As Taylor sat in her dressing room, scrolling through a sea of mixed emotions, Karoline met with her team, shook hands with veterans, hugged a tearful young woman who whispered, "Thank you for standing up for us." In one powerful image captured by a backstage photographer, Karoline was seen kneeling beside a 10-year-old girl in a MAGA hat, signing her notepad. The girl's mother posted the photo with the caption, "My daughter just met her hero, and it wasn't a pop star." That post went viral, and that moment, that was the real win. And a new kind of leader for a divided time. That is the final conclusion here. The next morning, as headlines raced and pundits battled, Karoline boarded a train back to New Hampshire. No entourage, no limo, just her, a worn leather tote, and a copy of the Constitution she kept folded in her purse. She sat by the window watching the countryside blur into spring green. Across from her, an older man in a Marine Corps hat leaned forward. "Miss Leavitt," he said, "you gave us our voice back last night." She smiled humbly. "Thank you, sir, but I just said what needed to be said." "No," he replied. "You said what we've been screaming into the void for years, and they finally had to hear it." That moment wasn't about politics anymore. It was about truth, about grit, about a woman who didn't need to sing a single note to move a nation. That night, Karoline posted a photo of the train ride. No caption, just her hand resting on that Constitution. Within minutes, tens of thousands shared it. Underneath the post, one user wrote, "America's not over. We just needed a reminder." And Karoline gave us one. If you have made it to the end of the story, please answer the following question for me. Have you ever watched someone stand up, not with rage, but with reason? Have you ever felt silenced until someone like Karoline walked into the room? Share your story in the comments. What would you have asked in that debate? And if you believe that truth should still matter in America, subscribe now. Because this channel, it's not about celebrity, it's about conviction.